I was already thinking about where I want to go. I think maybe around here is cool because it's Paris. I don't normally shoot here because it's very touristy, but there's a lot of people, so here the light's good. And also, the park next to the Louvre? I think my goal is, because I've been visiting Paris a lot these last few years, my goal is to visit so much and photograph so much of Paris to know everything. And that's when I feel like I'm done. When I know the streets without having to look at my phone, that's when I know that, okay. Yeah, I always also, every few years, I always, want to throw my old things away. And so, you're building something, you work on something for so long, let's say a book or a project, and sometimes it might take a year, decades, but you always look at your old stuff and go, especially when you're new as a photographer too, so. I think a lot of projects should take a long time. I don't think projects should be rushed, but that's my opinion. I think you can do good projects in a couple of...
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the form. If you...
Yeah. And it also depends on the subject. Some subjects don't last that long, right? If you're shooting a city, or if your project is a place, right? I think it's, a place isn't going to go away, Yeah. It's that's why this trip, I'm only in London for 4 days, and in Marseille for 4 days. I'm in Paris for 2-3 days. So every day, 12 hours, out. If I take 2 weeks travel and I get one photo, I'm lucky. I'm lucky.
And then you have the square. Cameraman never dies,
I don't know about that. You say that and then something happened. Let's walk by this. Before we go there, there's a cafe that every time I'm in Paris, it will be the same. Okay, every time I'm in Paris, I always go to this cafe because it's such a beautiful cafe. There's always interesting people sitting outside, and the sun hits it at almost times of the day. And it's still one of those cafes where there's a lot of the waiters are still dressed very formal, like they used to do, with the tie and the shirt and everything. And so I always go here, and I always hope to see something. I don't have anything good yet, but maybe one day. I've actually never eaten here or sit here. I always linger around like a creepy guy. Oh. I always circle around to see what's happening and who's sitting there. Because I want to shoot it from the outside in, but maybe one day, I'll sit down if there's something interesting, and I'll shoot it from the inside out, right? Different viewpoints.
Yeah, sure.
But when I'm just grabbing a coffee or when I'm just sitting grabbing food, I don't discriminate against the cafes, I like this place. There's just a lot going on here,
Yeah.
And the colors are cool with the stripes. And you get people's feet versus their heads. It's you can do so many things. People jumping, people climbing. But sometimes you need the one photo where everybody do the same stuff just right at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the one. That could be the one.
Make the goal to come back again and again.
Yeah. If I lived here, this would be a place I would go a lot. And then you have those areas too where people walk in and out of the light.
On those two alleys,
it's here now.
Back,
yeah.
It's quite nice.
Yeah, the last 2 days I noticed that in the morning you get the light here, and in the afternoon you get the light over there. So I think part of being a street photographer is you have to also try to be a weatherman. There's too. Everywhere else I go, I start early, sometimes I start maybe at 6, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. Paris, if I leave the house at 10 a.m., it's still empty. Sometimes. I mean, you have tourists, but not the locals or the interesting,
locals
people.
on weekends, they're quite
Yeah. No, because this is interesting because you get so many photographers. What about the people that are collectors or photography enthusiasts? People at the galleries. You should interview these people because I think there's a lot of channels talking about how to do this, how to take good photos, how to take photos of people up close. It's been overdone. Let's share the other side of street photography, right? The assistants, the curators, the galleries, even the editors. There's people, or for example, Steve McCurry, people at his level. He doesn't edit his own photo. He has people that do it. Interview those people. What is that like, right? Because maybe street photography isn't for everybody. Maybe the other things might be. Maybe I want to walk around and shine reflectors at random people while another street photographer takes the photos. Me, I used to play basketball, but now I just do weight training. But I used to play a lot of basketball, and then I broke my foot, but it's like a career-ending injury. Like my actual, like the middle of the foot, which is used to balance my body. There's a lot of like misalignment sometimes, because when you break your feet, you're learning to walk for the first time again. Because like, you know, when you're on a crutch or you're walking on a boot or a cast, you're using your good legs. When you're healed, when you put your leg, it's so weak. Yeah, that you're training the muscles, yeah. And also it's one of those things where the ligament is torn. So they put a screw in the foot, you know. So when I look at my shoes, the bottom of my shoes, because like, you know, as photographers, it's more used on one side, on the good side. So I'm trying to like, you know, compensate, but I'm also like, maybe that's how I used to be. You know what I mean? I don't know. Nice fan. How did I get started in photography? There's a few, I guess, things that happened in my life that led me to photography. It almost was an accident. How it kind of started partially was because, you know, before I started officially buying a camera and taking photos, I used to take photos with my phone all the time. It wasn't serious. It was more so just like to capture the things that I saw, things that I thought were beautiful and I wanted to remember. But I used to have a desire to be an illustrator and a painter, so I did that for a lot of my life. Ever since I was like a little kid, I always thought that one day I'd be an artist. You know, I'd illustrate or draw. And so I've always had the eye to pick out certain things that I thought were more attractive to me. And so every time when I was traveling with my phone, I used to take photos of these things. But it wasn't until one day when I was traveling, I went to Hong Kong, somebody broke into my apartment and they stole like almost everything that was valuable. So I had a camera, but it wasn't a camera that I used to take photographs the way I am now. It was a camera that I used to take like references for models so that I could paint and draw them. And then so I was in the market to buy a new camera at the time. And so coincidentally, my friend at work was also a street photographer, but he was like a, you know, very like hobby, didn't take it too seriously. I asked him for advice on what camera to buy. And, you know, he recommended a few things, and he recommended I buy a used full frame, like a Canon 6D, something simple. And I bought that. It was also a coincidence. At that time, I was also going to go to Iceland to travel. And I brought the camera to that trip to Iceland. And I just kind of fell in love with the photography. I stopped using my phone.
So did it change in the moment using a proper camera versus a phone?
I think it did, because like I saw right away that the results, you can see the results, you know, especially with low lighting situations or like situations where you can control the what is it, like the manual aspect of it. You know, you can slow the shutter down, you can choose to overexpose and underexpose and all those things. You had more control. I know you can do that with the cell phone these days, but back then that was hard to do, right? So it was different. It also made me feel that it just was like it made it feel more serious. It wasn't just like a hobby. I pulled out a phone, I took a photo. But even when I was doing it on the phone, I was very like, you know, my ex-girlfriend would be very upset because I would like take my time. I would wait for the right light. Even back then with my phone, I would wait for like the person to walk into this frame. I had no idea what I was doing. You know, those photos aren't great or anything like that. But I was always trying to like make the most out of the scene or what I was seeing. So I think having a physical camera definitely made it feel more like, okay, you know.
So you started with landscape photography? Yeah? You're still doing?
No, I don't, but I want to start kind of going back to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where my first year in photography was landscape.
And how did you evolve from landscape to street photography?
To street
What was
photography?
the
Oh,
idea,
man.
At this point?
I think, to be honest with you, for when I picked up the camera, and again, part of the reason why I stuck with it, because I bought the camera, I went to Iceland, and I could have just never used it again, but I stuck with it because I travel a lot. And my traveling was more so just to see the world, right? And I wanted to see, tourist things, but also just regular, simple, just experience different cultures and eat different food and, meet different people. And for some reason at that time, I was into going to beautiful, like, landscape places. I went to Switzerland. I went to, like, even, like, Jordan, to the deserts, I went to all these beautiful places where they had nature and things like that. But the problem was I don't live in these places. I go back home and I'm stuck in New York, and it's a great place to be stuck in, but there's no landscape. There's a city. So I think that was an influence of being in New York, because when I was not traveling, I would just photograph whatever was around.
Have you started street photography in New York, like by yourself, or influenced by some of the photographers communities?
Yeah, it's a mix. I think not at the beginning, because I wasn't following a lot of street photography. I didn't know what that was. When I was shifting over to shooting people, I just kind of like, I thought about more of like the National Geographic books that I grew up with. Like my dad had a lot of National Geographic books that I used to flip through. And I used to remember always seeing like these indigenous people, or these like different cultures, or like these people dressed in clothes and costumes that I've never seen before, right? I would think about that. And when I would travel, I would see that, similar things. And so subconsciously in my head, those were the things that I was kind of trying to, do. But then after a while, when I went, okay, this is fun. I do want to maybe shoot more people. Then there's the whole idea of street photography that I had not known. I thought it was just travel or like documentary. And then being in New York, you slowly start to discover the street photography community and all the photographers. I think to continue where I was going, New York was an influence, but also I kind of fell out of landscape naturally. I was taking stuff, but it was nice to look at. But for me, it lacked the meaning. It lacked like the story. It just felt like it was doing the same thing that other people had already done, And so I think I wanted more meaning in the things that I was photographing. So I kind of wanted to shift over to people. And so New York was one part, but also when I traveled, I kind of just like stopped taking photos of so much of the scene of the nature, but I was focusing more on people. I think back to what I said, both in different ways, but similar ways, is what you're given, but from the world as well. Like landscape, the mountain is there, but if the mountain doesn't have good light, or the mountain, the wind is too strong, or if there's animals, or if you go different season, you know what I mean? I think both practices, you have something where you have to kind of work with the world. Otherwise, you know what I mean? But with that said, they could also be very different in that same aspect, right? I love mixing where I travel. And I know, I like going to more developed places like in Europe, right? Parts of Asia are very developed. I like visiting those things, but I also like going to more underdeveloped places because I think to experience the world, you need to see both sides, right? But like places like India have definitely made me see the world differently. Also South America, which I went to very early on in my traveling. I think my first trip ever was only like 10 years ago when I left the country. I went to Japan, and Japan is like unreal, but it's like very developed. It's easy to be around, even though the culture is very different. Then my second trip was to South America, and I did like 4 or 5 countries. And it was just kind of like a shock because, even the worst places in some of the United States is different than places like in South America sometimes. But it's beautiful, and there's a lot of friendly people, and there's great, things to do, and there's great things to see, and it's rich in culture. But you come back from that trip, and it makes you realize, what you have more. And it makes you realize how different the world is, but also how similar. Right? Because even though they come from, different economical backgrounds and different, religions and different cultures, there's patterns that people do where you go, okay, well, this is why we're human. And then, but there's things that people do where you're like, wow, this is crazy that, you live like this, or how you live too. So it makes you appreciate it a lot. And, you always get people, right, when you go somewhere, they always try to warn you about something. It's always like, oh, it's dangerous, or, oh, you have to be careful, or this and that. But like, I think honestly, and this is my advice to the viewers, you should go and see it for yourself, right? I don't think the way that you perceive something is different than the way somebody else does. I mean, it's sometimes true that there are places that are a little bit overall more dangerous or more rude. But every time when I go to Paris, people are like, well, I don't understand how you can photograph there because people are like more rude. I don't find that at all. Maybe because I guess New York is rude, or I'm used to being rude people, that I don't find it, very rude at all. I'm gonna take a candid one. All of it. Everything. Really.
For what news?
No, I work for myself, independent. But I like to broadcast the world, Because what? Oh, okay. We can do a sad photo for you, okay? Let me think. This is messy. This is over here. I think from experience, and I've also heard other photographers say this too, the way that you present yourself as well. And it's not just what you wear, but also what you wear on your face.
The body language.
Exactly, your body language, the way your attitude towards things definitely influences, photography, because this genre that we do, it's not all us. It's a lot of what the world gives us. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're there to pull the trigger at the right time. We're there to observe and capture, and sometimes we can influence as well, right? Like what you just saw with the lady, with the rose, you can influence some things, but a lot of it is the world. Like, she was already sad. She already wanted her photo taken probably, so she played with it. And some people who don't want their photo taken, right? It's just what it is. But that's a good question. And what is your name?
Claudine Amar.
Claudine? Okay. Mm-hmm. So I have to send when I go home because it's in the camera. And then I put it into the computer and I send it to you, okay? I promise. You have my word, okay?
Because so many people.
Yeah, they're dying.
And kidnapped.
Yeah.
And died.
Yeah. When I first started, I think I was with the landscape stuff. I'll be honest with you, I just edited it in a way where I don't know for what reason, even when I was drawing and painting, I love the more earthy, muted colors. I don't know why, I just did. And so I incorporated that with my landscape stuff. And then when I switched to like street and people, I kind of took that and I put it on there. And my first couple of responses were like, oh my God, that looks so cinematic. Oh my God, that looks like a movie. Right? But that wasn't at the time, I wasn't even thinking. I was just taking colors from presets that I build and I put it on. But after a while, I started to realize that like a lot of the old, then when I started, films. Exactly, films and movies, but also like the Kodachrome photographs from back then looked very cinematic as well, right? And so I kind of just played along with it, but I am definitely inspired by film, for sure. But to be honest with you, it was almost an accident. I always make the decision afterwards. Yeah, I know people who like they shoot strictly on black and white film, or they have like monochromatic cameras. I'm not at that level yet. I don't know if I ever be. It's my appreciation to black and white photography, because it's hard to do. I think it's very hard to do, right? I think color, it's like sometimes people take a photo and it's based only on color. There's nothing happening. There's no composition. It's just color, and it works. But black and white, you really have to rely so much more on something, something different. Yeah, removing a layer of something that could have made the photo, be good, but you're now using other aspects, So honestly, I never thought I would do black and white ever. I never really understood black and white. I never appreciated it until more the last couple of years. I think when I first started, I saw things in color always. The movies we watch, the books we read, everything was in color. And when I started photography, it was, color. But I think after a while, when you study photography and you look at current black and white photographers, or even some of the masters who do black and white and do it well, you go, holy shit, this image would not be the same in color. It would not have the same feeling. it would be, this would be distracting or this wouldn't work, but it just works well in black and white. And so I'm trying to kind of like, there's certain photos when I take, I would maybe turn it to black and white if I knew that it would make the photo better, or if it would like enhance what I want the user to see. I said this, I think, in Polly B's video, but I don't know if it made it. I've never seen the video, by the way. But I would mute greens, or I would change greens so they're not so bright. I like my greens more, a little bit more yellow, desaturated. You know what I mean? And also the darkness is a little more dark instead of bright. And blues, I have a weird relationship with blues, but I love reds. I love warm colors. I like the overall image to feel blue or cool, but bright blue itself is a little like the blue sky is a little. so I have rules that I make, but I'm also always trying to experiment and play around with things. So who knows? Maybe I might like the opposite colors one day. It's funny because every single photo has to have a different edit. It's not like I save the same 10 presets and I use them.
Yeah, because usually maybe it will not work from one scene to another.
Exactly, because it's different. Same lighting, artificial. I get back to the same color, yeah. yeah.
I would not have said same colors.
Yeah. No, you're right. And honestly, I think I made it up because it was just my personal preference. It wasn't like, okay, I want to try to build this cool thing, or I want to force a style. I just went with stuff that I don't like, or I like, But I also think my background in illustrating and painting and stuff really helped too. When I was painting, they were a little bit more muted. Even the bright scenes were still very washed out. They were a little desaturated, You see the palette is very it's similar, right? Yeah. And this was years ago. This was way before. This was 2017, 18.
Did you ever sell something?
No, I never got to the point where I was I was still experimenting. I was very, very amateur, I never really.
It doesn't look very amateur.
Yeah, thank you.
Result,
yeah, but that's the thing though. I think that's good you say that, because a lot of artists, when they do something, I think even though they might not feel ready, other people might feel that they're ready, right? So it's a tough relationship, because there's a lot of great artists out there that don't appreciate their work enough, right? Or maybe appreciate it too much, and people might think the opposite, But I never really felt like I wanted to show this to anybody, I didn't want to sell it. It wasn't ready for me. Honestly, after I picked up my camera, when I went to Iceland, I stopped drawing. I put down the pencil, I put down the paintbrush. It's funny because when I started photography, I never thought it would be like this. I started because I wanted to maybe just have better quality photos to post, to share. Instead of my cell phone photos, I would have better quality, and that's it. But my photos that I shared was never a thing. It was just okay, I'm traveling, I just want to show people where I am, And then I got so hooked, I got so obsessed, and I still am, that I stopped, I put down the pencil, I put down the pen. I still have my easel, it's half a painting that I haven't touched. I wanted to finish it, but I haven't touched. Because I figured, I got into photography so much that I wanted to really spend time on it. And I think if you do too many things at once, you stretch yourself too thin, right? And so if you want to really truly be great at something, you really want to put your all into it, right? And I think for the longest time when I made the switch, I felt so bad about my painting stuff, because when you are younger and you thought that that's what you want to be, and in your whole life you keep thinking that, okay, this is one day I want to be this, that you feel guilty that you're doing something else that came out of nowhere. But after a while, I started to accept that this is
to the point of you're getting more enjoyment.
Yeah, I'm getting more enjoyment, and then at the end of the day, you have to follow your heart. You have to do what you want to, what it's telling you to do. And throughout these years, it's telling me to do photography. I think it's my drawing and stuff. It's one of those things where if it's calling again one day, if there's an itch, I will go back. I will put down the camera and I will go back.
you do see those two practices coexisting in a certain way?
I don't think so, because they're both so time consuming. They both require so much time. And for me, it's like, I've always been the type where if I want to really do something, I have to be good, or else I don't do it. Or I do it casual. Do you know what I mean? But photography and drawing for me and illustration is not a casual thing. I mean, it is because it's relaxing and I enjoy it, but it's like...
Too serious to...
It's serious, yeah. It's like something that I want to put my all in. And it's not just, I cannot just paint and then like forget about it and come back, right? I want to finish the painting, you know? I think overall, I'm a very competitive guy. You know, I used to play sports and I have siblings and stuff, so I used to be very competitive. I still am. So I think there's always like some type of competition of being better. And I think the hardest thing is, especially when it's about yourself, when you want to be better than your old stuff, it's the worst. You know what I mean? So I think all the time, I don't know if there's like an example I can give, but I'm always trying to keep things, I'm always trying to take it to the next level. Do you know what I mean? Without forcing it, right? I feel that I'm lucky that I am very self-critical. I never, when people say that they like my work, I appreciate it, I thank you, but I don't feel like I like my work yet. And I still don't, till this day. I don't feel like I'm at the level that I want to be, you know? And so it's not that I don't appreciate every comment and everything, but I don't believe it. It's not that I don't believe them. I just don't believe that my work is what they say it is. Because I do see people sometimes, you know, who they already think that they're so good and so great, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but you know, there's a certain level of quality that you produce when you don't feel that you're there, right? And I don't feel that I'm there. So, you know, to everybody listening, I don't want you to think that I don't appreciate any comments. I don't take it seriously, you know? And I don't think I will, because I also come from a place where, you know, my parents never gave me good feedback, so I'm not used to getting good feedback. So the moment I get something, it's almost like I get a little uncomfortable too, so.
But it's also, I felt it was also a great opportunity for self-improvement.
It is.
Because we are always running after when I can do, when
exactly,
I can
to be
do,
better.
when I can do more.
Yeah. But it's good and bad, because I've also run into situations where, like, you know, I have an accomplishment that I think anybody would love, but I just don't feel like it's anything, or I just don't, or I don't know how to express that I'm happy about it, right? So it might make people think that you're ungrateful, but that's not the case. I think it's more that, like, I just don't know.
I don't know how to handle it.
Exactly, I don't know how to accept it. And so when people come up at these shows, you know, the one that we're both in, the Imagination Gallery, and people are like, oh my God, you're like, I love your work. You're like, you inspire me so much. Like, you're so great. You're like one of the best. I'm just like, thank you, but like, you know, I get a little shy, you know, and I don't know really how to, because I don't feel that way. I don't. I think it's interesting because my parents, they never really understood why I travel so much. But they're different than I think most people, because they never traveled at all. You know, when we were younger, we grew up poor. You know, they were immigrants from another country. They came here, you know, no money, and they worked a lot. But I think even so, there's a lot of immigrants that work a lot but still can enjoy and travel. But my parents just never really had that. They never really cared. They weren't very adventurous. And so when I started to make money, and you know, and on my own, and I traveled on my own, I kept, you know, going places, and one place after the other. I built up a list of countries that I visited and saw. And it's definitely affected my life. It's changed my life. It's made me who I am. But for them, they never really understood. I think they are now, though, now that they're older and they're retired, because my dad now, and he was more of the person that was, how can I say it, a bit more controlling in the family. You know, my mom, if it was up to my mom, she would travel all the time. But my dad is the one that, like, kind of traditionally, he, like, is the worker and all that, you know, and he's the strong guy in the family, whatever that means. And now he's retired, he's kind of sitting at home just watching YouTube videos of different countries. That's how his traveling is. And I always ask him, I'm like, you know, you can just come with me. And he's like, before he would always like almost make fun of me, like, oh, you've been to like, you're going to Ethiopia, why? Why do you need to go to Ethiopia? You know what I mean? Like, but Ethiopia is beautiful in its own way. But now he'll like look at this YouTube video and he'll find something. He's like, oh man, this place, Kenya, is gorgeous, you know? And I'm like, like, you know, I told you, I asked you to come, you know, but maybe someday, yeah. It's just kind of sad though, because now they're very old, you know? My dad's like in his mid 70s, and yeah, you know, he actually, on his list, he really wants to go to Paris. He's never been, you know, and there's a, you know, and so I'd love to take him.
That could be a nice.
Yeah, a nice little trip. Yeah, and it's easier. I think Paris is still a city. You know, I kind of understand. You're asking me if what I'm doing now is like living for them almost.
Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't think of it that way. I think it's a good question, but I think I'm trying to live my own life. I do want to gift them back, but in different ways. Like I want to influence them to go to places and do things that maybe they didn't think about because they were too busy trying to support 3 kids, you know, in a country that they don't know the language and they don't understand, right? Because, you know, because we grew up, the 3 of me, my brother, sister, we grew up in, obviously we were born in the United States, and we are, we know the culture very well. We grew up with it. But every time when there's a holiday, like basic holidays, they don't understand. And they don't really care to understand. So like, I think my gift is really to let them live the life that I think they never had, instead of me living it for them. I want them to live it too before it's too late, you know?
If someone tells you like, here it's risky, here it's dangerous, or maybe here they don't like photographers, whatever, like, does it make you scared of it, or the opposite, like you're like, okay?
Yeah, it depends. I think it depends who tells me these things. If it's somebody who's like also a photographer and like, you know, and I respect and know that, you know, they know what they're doing, then I will listen. But if it's somebody who's like my mom, because she always tells me everywhere is bad. You know, she's like, don't walk outside, it's bad. Seriously. You know how moms are. But if it's somebody who like I know have been to this place, because sometimes people also like they've never been there, but they'll tell you it's bad. I'm like, how do you know? Like you heard it from somebody else. But overall, I do stay cautious. You know, obviously, I don't want to like. I'm not gonna like be scared, but it's like I will go and find out myself. Like I think a good example is Morocco. You know, I've been to Morocco before, but I wasn't really photographing when I first went there. And then when again, a lot of people warned me, you know, hey, look, it's really not good for street photography. People don't like it. And I've heard that many times throughout the years, you know? And when I went for myself, they were absolutely right. Absolutely right. But I still managed to find a way. You know, you still manage to find a way, and you want to be respectful to the people, but you also have to go and see it for yourself. Because what's bad or dangerous or something for them might be a little different. Or you might keep that in mind and be a little bit more cautious. I'll be honest with you, I think when I first started photography, especially with like street and anything, I think what attracted me was more of like the grand photograph, the grand scenes. And what I mean by that are like the scenes that are like attractive to everybody. Like I would go shoot Times Square, and I would go shoot the Empire State Building, and I would, you know what I mean? And I think as you mature a little bit more and you do all of that already, you're going back to like the roots. You're going back to the places that nobody ever really sees you, because there's a sense of like, you know, wanting to find your own voice and style, and with that you want to be original to some extent, right? But also you kind of get I'm somebody who wants to challenge myself, and I want to do new things, and I can't just photograph the same things all the time. So to your question, Philadelphia wasn't really interesting to me. You know, I moved out because I just felt like I never really connected with the city, even though I spent a lot of my life there. It was just not, it wouldn't have made me the person I wanted to become if I stayed there. But it's a beautiful city. It's where I grew up, and I know it very well, and my parents are still there. So I go back often. And I think one day, to be honest with you, I do want to document either parts of the city, you know, or something that will, you know, be a little bit more close to and personal to me. So.
Did you feel like influenced by New York? Like,
Oh yeah,
do you
for
think
sure.
this city is changing you? Like,
Yeah, it's already changed me for sure. Yeah, it's definitely something. It's a place where I can feel very comfortable, just to be myself, you know, because there's so much diversity and things like that. I think Philly for a little bit, and I don't want to talk bad about Philly, but you know, Philly for a little bit it just wasn't going to let me become the person I wanted to become. And it might not have been the city. It might just have been I needed a change too. Who knows? But you know, I made the move, and I'm glad that I did.
It's not released yet. It's still in the making.
It's like it's
but
Is it the beta version?
That's the pre-series version that I made.
wow.
But maybe we'll need to move out of the car there.
they will see.
Which airport is this, by the way?
It's Charles de Gaulle.
Okay.
It's the north. You're flying north. North.
North, yeah.
Yeah, that's the terminal.
Okay. Oh yeah, sorry.
But there is a problem with the paper. It should be very shiny, and this is a it's a screen printing,
wow.
shiny on shiny.
Yeah,
and,
is this
so-
self-published?
Yeah,
Good for you, man.
with a spot team.
This is such a good photo too for the cover. It's like a shot, right?
Yeah.
And she's offering food.
Yeah.
I love how it's blocking the face. This reminds me of there was a photo I seen recently that had this too, and it worked really well. Do you crop your photo at all, or do you always keep it out of camera?
I try to keep it
Okay.
most of the time, but
Okay.
sometimes it's better to
Yeah.
remove a little bit.
I agree.
But
I respect the purest people, but like, look, if you have the ability to crop it and it makes it a better photo
Yeah. But usually, for me, I try to have to be
in camera as much as you can.
really conscious
Yeah.
in camera.
This one's just great. It just feels like there's so many stories, you know. It feels like that area.
Yeah, that's the
And I haven't been there. I don't know what it's like, but that's how I imagine it. You know, I close my eyes and I think about
It's
it.
very traditional.
Yeah.
I like it very much.
And the food, you've got like all the elements, right?
And the scene is very beautiful. Actually, they make like anniversary
Yeah.
of people has died.
Yeah.
So we made a celebration for the burying.
Yeah.
And then 1 week, and then 3 weeks, 1 month, 3 months, until like 7 years.
Wow. Everybody has a jumping one. This is the one. Because if you have this is the one.
Speaking with some friends, photographer friends, they said in a book you always have
Everybody has the same
horse
yeah.
and a dog.
Yep, horse and a dog. Somebody jumping into the water. There was another one we talked about, remember? The rainbow one. There's always a rainbow one.
Yeah. But it's difficult in black and white.
Yes, yes. I love how sometimes a photograph, even if the subject is almost centered, there's so much happening that makes them not look centered, right? This is one of those things where like the hand is like the very center,
Yeah.
but you're so distracted by this that it doesn't, and it works, you know? Did you shoot this in black and white or did you shoot in color and you convert
it's
it?
in color, but I've been shooting black and white for 15 years.
Yeah.
So kind of know what I'm doing in black and white, even if it's like
In
with
color,
the
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
a whole.
Yeah. Oh, this one's great. This one's really good, and I love this places really well. Yeah, I'd love to own this book, man. I think it's a very good book. Honestly, it's a very good book. Books like this make me realize that I'm not ready for a book.
That's a compliment. That's a real compliment.
No, I'm serious. I think books. You don't just want to throw a lot of pretty pictures in a book, you know, because like that's like
It's like 10 years,
that's like a
it's
greatest hits.
It's like 10 years shooting, 10
Yeah.
years shooting
Yeah.
and 2.5 years
Yeah.
of editing.
Yeah, you want to have like, you want to let the viewer feel the message or the place or the story, right? And there's a lot of that here, right? I could just like take a photo and not have to worry so much about the editing, but it's almost like in today's age, you have the tools to go beyond just correcting, right? Just like the camera, you have the tool just to go beyond shooting film, beyond shooting black and white, right? You have other things to help you take that genre to the next level. So for me, I find the result of when I edit something much more interesting, right? And I'm trying, I trust me, I used to edit a lot more. It used to look a lot more unrealistic. But now I'm at the point where like I do want to keep lots of elements the same. Like I'm not gonna add light that's not there. You know what I mean? And the colors, yes, they are a little bit touch, but I'm not changing color completely. There's still, the reds are the reds. They just might look a little bit like burnt, you know, or the blue might look a little bit light, but they're still those colors. So I do like the idea of keeping things pure, and I respect people that do that. For example, look, if I shot with Kodachrome, I would keep it pure because I love those colors. But the raw files that these cameras give you, they're not great colors. I think today a lot of people, we tend to overshare. I think that's part of our culture. We share a lot. I don't know if it's oversharing, but we like to share. I think that's our society. And I think, you know, with social media, there's something to be said about wanting to have a large following because it's good for the brand, right? It's like opening up a store and having a lot of potential customers. That's what the following is used for, especially for maybe guys like us, where like some of us, this is our full-time job, you know, where, you know, to sell a print, to sell a book, to sell a workshop, you need to have people following you, right? An audience. Otherwise, who else is going to promote you? And so sometimes I do end up posting things that I know, and I don't take things for Instagram, but like after the fact, I might edit photos and I might go, okay, well, this one, I know people will like this one. You know what I mean? And I'll post it. But that might not be the same stuff that I will one day put into a book. I'm getting to the point now where I'm bored of walking around taking individual stuff, but there's a fun thing, and you know, something fun in that too, right? Because at the end of that, you know, when you build up a big archive, you might find parallels and themes that you could put into a project that you didn't think that you would have. But I do like having an idea, and I do like knowing sometimes when I walk outside or when I travel, it's for something that I'm working on. You know, if you have a unpublished work and you release it for the first time, and people see it in the format that it's meant to be in, or it's better to be in, right? Because we all know social media on the phone isn't the best way to see some of these photos, right? Having something printed, right, is much better. Or large format. It could be digital, but also larger format. Of course it's better, right? You want somebody to open up something for the first time and go, holy shit, like, this is amazing. He's been saving this, but the problem is if you don't have the audience to kind of pick it up, right? And also this is your full-time job and you need the money, it's difficult. Luckily I do have a job, and I don't, you know, if I have a book, I don't need it to sell out. I just want it, whoever really likes my art, I want them to see it in the way that it maybe should be seen. So it's almost like a win-win and a lose-lose if you ignore social media and you just have things that are unpublished. But that's not to say if you're already a photographer that has a lot of photos, there's nothing wrong with maybe putting out a book that has a mix of both and then keep resharing old work. And your next couple of projects, completely unseen. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're a new photographer and you're just starting, who's going to like really believe that you know what you're doing if you don't have an example of what you're showing, right? To me, my standard, and I think a lot of people who've been shooting for a while, our standard is like, it's not enough just to have the main subject be the interesting thing. And sometimes it is. Sometimes
it's a whole thing.
It is. Yeah, and I was talking to who about this? Josh K. Jackson. He's a friend of mine now who, I was in London last week and I saw him. We were shooting together for a couple of days. Where some photos you look at, they're not great photos, but they're still considered some of the best photos of all time. You know, they're very simple, just single subject, you know, or just a crowd of people with no clear subject and composition's off. It's not even, you know, it's crooked and it's like, but it's still considered a masterful photo. But I think more so because of the history. I don't even feel that like... Excusez. Vous voulez que vous me preniez une photo? Ah, merci. Avec... Bien, dans l'autre sens, c'est ça? Yeah. And also sometimes being too artistic
could lose a kind of...
could be too much. Yeah. Where there's so much layers, there's so much framing, and like it just looks so like set up and perfect. That's cool. But I don't know how much that could appeal to certain people, like regular people versus the art crowd. Versus like, you know, sometimes you might have a simple photo. Like the photo of, I always think about this when anybody asks me to close my eyes and think about like one of the first photos I can remember. It's the one where the sailor or the Navy person is kissing the girl in Times Square.
Yeah,
Simple photo.
As instead?
Yeah, I don't remember the name. But you know what I'm talking about. It's black and white, right? It's like very, like, it's not even perfectly aligned. It's a very classical photo, but it's such a simple photo. But it represented something. The story itself is more powerful than the visuals of that photo. And sometimes that's enough. Street photography is like a dance, right? You have to have good footwork to be able to maneuver around things and know to get the shot you want, position yourself to be in the right place.
Tibio está el pañuelo todavía que tu adiós me repetía desde el muelle de las sombras. Tibio, como en la tarde muere el sol, mi sol de nieve, sin esperanza y sin alondras. Tibio guardo el beso que dejaste en mis labios al marcharte, porque aún no te olvidé. Tú, yo sé que el cielo y tú vendrán a mí para salvar mis manos presas a esta cruz.